The story you are about to hear is a compilation of documented true facts featuring historical characters, events, or places that has played a role in shaping history. Please sit back and listen as I recite this narrative for you.
I am evil. Not 100%, but I am evil.
Dubbed the Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez was an American serial killer who killed at least 14 people and tortured dozens more before being captured in 1985. Who was Richard Ramirez? Born in Texas in 1960, Richard Ramirez was an American serial killer who killed at least 14 people and raped and tortured at least 2 dozens more, mostly during the spring and summer of 1985. After developing epilepsy as a child, he became a heavy drug user and cultivated an interest in Satanism, which became a calling card for investigators at his crime scenes. Apprehended in August 1985, Ramirez was sentenced to death at the conclusion of his trial in 1989. He spent the remainder of his days at California's San Quentin prison before dying from cancer on June 7, 2013 at age 53. Criminal beginnings. Richard Ramirez was born Ricardo Leiva Munoz Ramirez on February 29, 1960 in El Paso, Texas. He is the fifth child of Mexican immigrants Mercedes and Julian Ramirez, known as Richard or Ricky. Ramirez was 2 years old when he was struck by a falling piece of furniture and sustained a large laceration on his forehead. Then when he was 5, he was struck in the head by a swing and knocked unconscious, and from then on until his early teens, he suffered from frequent seizures. As an adolescent, Ramirez was heavily influenced by his older cousin Miguel, who had recently returned from fighting in the Vietnam War. The two smoked marijuana together as Miguel would tell young Ramirez about the atrocities he witnessed and the violent rapes he committed while stationed in Vietnam. There was even a photo of him posing with a severed head belonging to a woman he had brutalized. Miguel taught Ramirez some skills he learned in the military, including stealth tactics and how to kill. The first serious crime that Ramirez was involved in was the murder of his cousin's wife at 13 years old. On May 4, 1973, Ramirez was with Miguel at his home when Miguel shot his wife in the face during an argument. Though Miguel was found not guilty by reason of insanity, he spent the next 4 years incarcerated in the state mental hospital. For a while after the shooting, Ramirez lived with his sister and her husband Roberto and had become withdrawn from friends and family. Roberto was a peeping Tom and would take Ramirez along with him at night to peep in the windows. It was at this time that Ramirez developed an interest in Satanism and started using harder drugs, namely LSD. Dropping out of school in the 9th grade, Ramirez was arrested for the first time in 1977 for marijuana possession. As a teenager, Ramirez began associating his sexual fantasies with violence, and while he was still at school, he worked part-time at a Holiday Inn, which he used to his advantage. He would use his pass key to enter the room and rob the guests. One night, however, a guest returned to his room to find Ramirez trying to rape his wife and proceeded to beat him. Ramirez was arrested, but the charges were dropped when the couple refused to testify. Nevertheless, he lost his job at the inn. He was arrested twice in the Los Angeles area for auto theft in 1981 and again in 1984, and noticeably began to neglect his personal hygiene. Night Stalker cuts his path. Theft turned to violence with Ramirez's first known murder on June 28, 1984. The victim was 79-year-old Jeannie Vinco, who was sexually assaulted. She had been stabbed multiple times while sleeping in her bed, and her throat had been cut so deep that she was almost decapitated in her own home. What followed was a spree of brutal murders, rapes, and robberies, leaving dozens of victims in its wake. Ramirez struck nearly 9 months later. On March 17, 1985, Maria Hernandez was shot in the face outside her apartment, but she survived. Her roommate Dale Okazaki heard the gunshot and hid behind a counter in the kitchen. As she raised her head to see where Ramirez was, he shot her in the forehead, killing her. Shortly afterward, he came across Chai Lun Yu in her car in Monterey Park. He pulled her out of her car and shot her twice, spurring a media frenzy that saw Ramirez dubbed the Valley Intruder by the press. Just 10 days later, on March 27, Ramirez broke into a home in Whittier and killed Vincent Zazara in his bed. When his wife Maxine woke, she was beaten by Ramirez and bound, and he demanded to know where to find her valuables. While he searched the room, Maxine managed to get herself free and pulled a shotgun out from under the bed. Unfortunately, it wasn't loaded, and Ramirez, now enraged, shot her 3 times, then mutilated her body with multiple stab wounds. He gouged out her eyes and put them in a jewelry box he took with him. A full-scale police operation yielded no concrete results. Bill Doy and his wife Lillian were surprised by Ramirez in their home on May 14, 1985. He shot Doy in the face, then beat him until he was unconscious. He then bound Lillian and raped her before searching the house for valuables. Bill lived long enough to get to the hospital, but succumbed to his injuries. Over the next few months, his murder rate escalated, claiming another dozen victims in a frenzy of burglary, assault, and brutal violence, complete with satanic rituals. The Los Angeles Police Department responded by putting together a dedicated task force with the FBI stepping in to assist. Ramirez, driving a stolen vehicle, entered the home of Mabel, Ma, Belle, and her sister Florence, Nettie Land on the night of May 29. Using a hammer he found in their kitchen, he bound Land and bludgeoned her. He then bound and bludgeoned Belle and gave her electric shocks using an electrical cord. Ramirez raped Land and drew a pentagram on her thigh and on the bedroom walls with a lipstick. The women weren't found for 2 days, and although both were alive, Belle died later from her injuries. On July 2, 1985, Ramirez quietly entered the home of Mary Louise Cannon. She was asleep in her bed when he bludgeoned her with a lamp until she was unconscious. Then he stabbed her using one of her own kitchen knives. 5 days later, Joyce Lucille Nelson was beaten to death by Ramirez in her home while sleeping on the couch in the living room. He kicked her in the head, leaving a clear shoe print from his sneakers on her face. Ramirez bought a machete on July 20, 1985 and drove a stolen car to Glendale. He entered the home of Lila and Max O'Needing and burst onto the bedroom. He hacked at both of them with the machete, then shot them both in the head. After they died, he inflicted further wounds to their bodies with the machete. Hours later, he killed Shinaron Covenant in his home by shooting him in the head. Ramirez raped his wife Sumkid multiple times, sodomized her, and beat her. Their young son was bound as Ramirez dragged Sumkid around, telling her to show him where the valuables were. While he attacked her, he forced her to swear to Satan. The next victims were Ilyas Abuwath and his wife Sakina. On August 8, 1985, Ramirez entered the home and made his way to the bedroom. He shot Ilyas in the head, killing him instantly. Sakina was handcuffed and beaten and forced to show where the jewelry was before being sodomized and raped. She too was forced to swear to Satan. Her young son entered the room, so Ramirez tied him up. As soon as Ramirez left, Sakina untied her son and went to the neighbors seeking help. The relentless media and police pressure, aided with the descriptions from his surviving victims, forced Ramirez to leave the LA area that August. The last known murder committed by Ramirez occurred on August 18. He broke into the home of Peter and Barbara Pan in San Francisco. Peter was shot in the head straight away, and Barbara was sexually violated and beaten, then shot in the head. Remarkably, Barbara survived. Ramirez drew a pentagram on the bedroom wall in lipstick and wrote, "Jack the Knife." His unmistakable MO, complete with satanic symbolism, meant that the Valley Intruder moniker was no longer applicable. The press quickly coined a new name, the Night Stalker, as most of his assaults took place at night in his victims' homes. Reign of Terror ends. Ramirez's action on his final night of terror on August 24, 1985, soon led to his capture. Ramirez broke into the apartment of Bill Carnes and Inez Erickson. Carnes was shot in the head and Ramirez raped Erickson. He tied her up and left, but she was able to get to the window and see the vehicle he was driving. She gave a description of the car and Ramirez to the police, and the information was broadcasted on news reports. The car was identified by a teenager who managed to write down part of the license plate number. On August 28, the car was located and a fingerprint was found on the mirror. They now knew their suspect was Ramirez. His mugshots were shown on national television and graced the cover of every major newspaper throughout California. The following day, a group of people saw Ramirez and surrounded him, beating him as he tried to steal another car. When police arrived, the angry mob was still beating Ramirez and the police had to intervene before they killed him. Trial, conviction, and sentencing. Ramirez waited in jail as his trial was continuously pushed off, the delay marked by a series of motions and bickering between the prosecutors and defense attorney. Because the geographical spread of the crimes also complicated the scope of the trial with jurisdictional issues, some of the charges against Ramirez were dropped in order to expedite what was becoming a long journey to justice. The jury selection process finally moved forward on July 22, 1988, and the trial itself commenced the following January. During this time, Ramirez attracted a cult-like following of supporters, many of whom were black-clad Satan worshippers. Ramirez himself often dressed in black along with dark shades for his courtroom appearances. Yet another delay occurred when one juror was found murdered on August 14, 1989, but rumors that Ramirez had orchestrated her death proved unfounded. On September 20, 1989, the jury finally returned a unanimous guilty verdict on 43 charges, including 13 counts of murder, 5 counts of attempted murder, 11 sexual assault charges, and 14 burglary charges. 2 weeks later, the same jury recommended the death sentence on 19 counts. Leaving the courtroom, Ramirez responded, "Hey, big deal. Death always comes with the territory. I'll see you in Disneyland." The convicted murderer was finally sentenced to death in the gas chamber on November 7, 1989, and was sent to San Quentin Prison in California to spend the remainder of his days. Final years, death, and legacy. While incarcerated, Ramirez married one of his supporters, 41-year-old Doreen Leoy, in 1996. His long-awaited appeal finally made it to the California State Supreme Court in 2006 before being rejected. Ramirez eventually was linked to more vicious crimes. In 2009, a DNA sample connected him with the April 10, 1984 rape and murder of a 9-year-old girl in San Francisco. After nearly 24 years in death row, Richard Ramirez died on June 7, 2013 at the age of 53 from complications related to B-cell lymphoma. According to San Quentin corrections officers, Ramirez's death came shortly after he was taken to Marine General Hospital in Green Bay, California.
A serial killer comes about by circumstances and like a recipe: poverty, drugs, child abuse. These things, contribute to a person's frustration and anger, and at some point in life, he explodes.
Hey everyone! I just wanted to express how grateful I am that you took the time to listen to my narration. Hopefully you enjoyed it. I am Twisted Mind, and please enjoy the rest of your day. Salamat!